We both know the heart's not bulletproof. By Kodos and Smiles. Summary. I guess it did burn after all. The sentence slipped out unbidden as Dazai reached the finger out to tentatively, near reverently, brush one of the scars curving under Chuuya's shoulder blades. Chuuya shivered under the touch before jerking his head around. What the hell are you talking about? Dazai weighed whether he should acknowledge the scars any further, especially given the new bleeding hole in Chuuya's shoulder just waiting to scar, but he supposed Chuuya deserved to know, and maybe a distraction would do them both some good. The wings, when you activated corruption against Verlaine, you had wings of black flame. Or, what if the black flame wings Chuuya had during corruption burned him? He and Dazai confront the scars left behind after a mission gone wrong. Age 16, 20 minutes after the defeat of the Beast of Kiva. Dazai kept running his hands through Chuuya's hair, the strands of auburn streaked through with dark red, listening closely to the surroundings as well as Chuuya's labored breathing. He didn't realize how patient he'd been until one of his men came to tell him transportation was ready. "Chuuya," Dazai sing-songed. He shook Chuuya, trying to wake him. He stopped when the boy in his arms trembled and a pained whine sounded from him. Dazai remembered himself, remembered what he'd just watched Chuuya do, became aware all over again of the stickiness of blood that coated so much of Chuuya's form, most everywhere they touched. Despite this, he tried one more time to wake him, only with words. "Come on, Chuuya, don't make me carry you again. Twice in 1 week?" But he knew what he was saying wasn't fair. He'd just seen Chuuya wield a power no human should have handled. Could barely handle, really. And on top of it all, Chuuya had barely even slept since his stint of torture at the facility, only briefly napping on the car ride back to the outskirts of the city. "Do you need help with him, sir?" The man still standing near must have been paying some attention. Dazai made a hum of consideration, even though he already knew his answer. "No, I'll get him." He made himself sound resigned, as if it wasn't entirely his choice. Though the threats had been neutralized, Verlaine very likely dead and N confirmed dead, and no one should be after Chuuya anymore, that didn't mean Dazai was quite ready to let him go. How strange of himself, letting the boy he was shifting carefully onto his back get tortured earlier that very day, only to not even let the mafia grunts help him carry him. With the destruction of the roads and pretty much everything around them, a helicopter was decided as the best mode of transport, especially for the injured. He slumped Chuuya onto one of the helicopter seats and took the one beside him. Dazai glanced over, having to monitor Chuuya's breathing by the rise and fall of his chest, now that he couldn't hear over the sound of the engine and blades whirring. At all the noise, the change in position over an only somewhat cushioned chair, and the loss of contact with Dazai and his ability, Chuuya roused. Something in Dazai's chest released as he found what little light filtered through Chuuya's eyes. As Chuuya tried to blink away the confusion, blink back the memories he could recall of how he got here. Though the entirety of his existence surely consisted of discomfort and pain, Chuuya still shifted his back, as if trying to escape some specific irritation. "What?" Dazai asked. "Burn." Burn? That wasn't nearly enough information. What did he mean by burn? The black flames generally seemed harmless to Chuuya himself, even if Arahabaki did wreak havoc on his body in other ways. And as Dazai had held Chuuya, he'd monitored how Chuuya's body heat had steadily returned back to normal. So why did he feel burned? Could it have caused some kind of fever? "Chuuya, do you feel warm right now?" Dazai didn't know quite why it felt important, but it was just worrying. Chuuya shrugged his shoulders, hissing, "Can't tell jack shit right now. Everything hurts." Dazai decided to judge for himself, reaching one dirty bandaged hand out of Chuuya's forehead. "The hell are you doing?" "Stop squirming around so much. You should be saving your energy." Chuuya scoffed at that, but didn't move as Dazai's hand came to rest over his forehead. Dazai dropped his hand after only a couple of seconds, letting Chuuya's hair fall back over his forehead after he'd pushed it out of the way. "Well?" Chuuya asked. "Maybe a little warm, but nothing seemingly to worry about." Maybe his back had just gotten burnt somehow? Or maybe Chuuya's nerves were completely fried. As long as his spine was okay, it shouldn't be too bad. Chuuya only managed to sit still for a minute before he started fidgeting again. It was putting Dazai on edge. But of course, even after all that, Chuuya still found enough energy to annoy him. You know it's all over now, right? Dazai broke the silence. We're on our way back to Mafia headquarters, where they'll treat your tiny little self. Hey, Chuuya tried protesting the high jab, but it was half-hearted at best. And it'll all be fine. Dazai ended in a reassuring note. Chuuya just slumped in response, wincing as he did so. Chuuya's back, huh? Dazai tried to go over the fight in his mind. The only thought he could draw was the image of those black wings sprouting from Chuuya's back. Flames. Okay, maybe there was more to it than he thought. Dazai was drawn from his thoughts by Chuuya falling against his shoulder, fitfully sleeping for the remainder of the ride. Dazai couldn't bring himself to push Chuuya off, noticing that like this, Chuuya could take pressure off his back, leaning to his side instead. So Dazai surrendered to his fate as pillow once again, adjusting his position slightly so that the other boy could hopefully be more comfortable. Not like anyone would notice anyway. As Chuuya got out of the helicopter, refusing as much help as he was able to before being near forced to sit on a stretcher, Dazai definitely decided he couldn't ask to see Chuuya's back. That would be weird, and he could tell Chuuya had reached his limit. After the events of the last couple days, with this to cap it all off, it seemed that he was just shutting down at this point. Well, whatever physical injuries Chuuya had, even be it back flame burns on his back, Dazai was sure the Mafia doctors could treat it just fine, and even more confident that Chuuya would bounce back because of his own will. So Dazai ignored the pit in his stomach as they finally wheeled Chuuya off to the infirmary. Age 17. A string of curses was running through Dazai's head on repeat, not paying enough attention to even vary the pattern, because they were better than this. He was better than this. They'd been partners for a little over a year now. These things weren't supposed to happen. Even though Chuuya had taken the bullet for him, Dazai felt the shock through his body all the same. The space had been too tight, and yet not tight enough to funnel enemies through. They'd been in the middle of it all, not giving Chuuya enough space to use his skills to their fullest without causing unwanted destruction and a mess they didn't know if they could clean up this time. Corruption would have been a death sentence for Dazai as well as everyone else in the room, so that was off the table. They just whittled down their enemies to a manageable amount, gunshots and heavy kicks drowning out the world, when Dazai found a stray bullet that slid past his careful eye and was headed straight for him. Chuuya, being the idiot he was, tried to block it, but the close quarters meant that when he reached for the bullet, he ended up tripping into Dazai. With physical contact established between them, the bullet hit flesh instead of a wall of gravity, blasting clean through Chuuya's upper left shoulder. So, to a safe house they had gone, a close one, a nice one, and Dazai didn't know if he was angrier at himself, Chuuya, or that asshole that shot the bullet. Chuuya was leaning on the countertop, holding his shoulder like it was casual. It really wasn't a horrible injury. Not for being shot, that is. They wouldn't even have to take out the bullet. But a gunshot wound was a gunshot wound, and they both know it shouldn't have happened. Chuuya stayed silent since it happened. They both had a contained grimace on his face, more anger than pain, that communicated through glances and not since. Grabbing the hefty first aid kit from the bathroom, Dazai began rummaging through to find what he needed. It set it on the small kitchen table, 2 empty chairs sitting on either side, yet the bleeding bastard hadn't elected to take a seat. Chuuya sighed as Dazai began threading a needle, knowing what was coming next. This was a nice shirt, Chuuya lamented. They both knew he didn't really care about the shirt. It wasn't about the shirt. It somehow broke the tension and didn't ignore it. Usually they didn't come back from missions with holes in their shirts, goddammit. Off. He managed to filter most of the anger from his voice, sounding almost absent. Chuuya visibly rolled his eyes, as if this wasn't a necessary step in what Dazai needed to do to make sure he wasn't actively bleeding anymore, before starting to pull the shirt over his head. Dazai clicked his tongue. Not like that, you dumbass. An auburn brow was raised, and a frustrated sigh returned it. Dazai moved to face Chuuya, fingers undoing the buttons of Chuuya's shirt, so he didn't do further damage to his shoulder. Really? Did getting shot knock out what little common sense you had? Chuuya gave a frustrated sigh right back. Yeah, maybe it did, considering the person I blocked the bullet for. Don't know what I was thinking, he muttered. The second Dazai had done all the buttons, Chuuya only keeping himself still to make it over as quickly as possible. He basically tore the shirt from his body, jerking it across his shoulder and ruining any damage they had managed to escape by unbuttoning the shirt in the first place. The least you could do is stop acting like an idiot for the night if you're capable of self-preservation. That's rich coming from you. That was not their normal bickering, undercurrents too strong for their normal banter to steady a course. Dazai's eyes flashed to the table as Chuuya balled up his shirt and threw it halfway across the room as some small release of tension. Front or back? Chuuya asked in a clipped tone. Dazai was surprised he wasn't choosing for himself. Back. He didn't feel like seeing Chuuya's face right now, watching the suppressed pain as he stitched them up. Pain Chuuya shouldn't even be in right now because what should have happened is the bullet hitting him, even if it would have been worryingly close to his heart. In response, Chuuya pulled out a chair and straddled it, sitting backwards so that his entire back was bare to Dazai, exit bullet wound easily accessible. But that was not the first thing that caught Dazai's attention. He drew in a tense breath, almost a gasp if he'd allow himself to admit it. There were several notable scars on Chuuya's back. Ones he'd witnessed the origins of but had never observed the aftermath. A stab wound from betrayed loyalty, and 2 burn scars curving beneath his shoulder blades, right where wings would imaginarily attach. It was only logical for Chuuya to have scars, and Dazai knew that. Chuuya may not lose fights often, but is not invincible either. Something about seeing the marks though, the signs left behind, somehow made the vulnerabilities that much more human, because they'd healed and he carried them. Dazai had scars of his own too, but Chuuya's scars were fascinating. Huh, I guess it did burn after all. The sentence slipped out unbidden as Dazai reached a finger out to tentatively, near reverently, brush one of the scars curving under Chuuya's shoulder blades. Chuuya shivered under the touch before jerking his head around. What the hell are you talking about? Dazai weighed whether he should acknowledge the scars any further, especially given the new bleeding hole in Chuuya's shoulder just waiting to scar, but he supposed Chuuya deserved to know, and maybe a distraction would do them both some good. The wings, when you activated corruption against Verlaine, you had wings of black flame. Chuuya stayed silent as he listened. Dazai finally began to actually treat the current wound, soaking gauze and antiseptic and pressing it to the wound. Dazai let Chuuya finish his short hiss of pain before continuing. You complained about your back that night, but I assumed it was nothing. Guess it wasn't. Chuuya gave a thoughtful scoff/hum. He wasn't about to admit to always being curious about exactly how those scars appeared. Had hated the way he had yet more marks on his body he couldn't remember getting. He knew what the scars looked like, of course. It was his own body, after all. There were 2 lines on his back, uneven and unnaturally smooth. The dull red of healed flesh, curving around his shoulder blades. Skin burnt so badly that it had left a permanent mark. Not that he ever saw them, unless he tried. With all the pain in his body when he first woke up from using corruption against Givre, his first willing use of corruption and the one that had sealed his fate, he noticed the seared lines of skin on his back as small discomforts. They would push him over the edge of being too hot for the next month whenever he tried to sleep, or a room was just bordering on stuffy. Because for whatever reason, while the rest of his body had gotten off unaffected by the black flames of his ability, his back was burned. When he first looked at it in the mirror, instead of uncomfortably rolling his back against the bed to feel where they are, he thought it almost looked like where wings would sprout from. But it was a ridiculous thought, of course. Why the hell would he ever have wings? It didn't make sense. Like, logically, wings of black flame or something didn't make sense. At the time, he wasn't about to ask about eyewitness accounts of what had happened during the first use of corruption, especially because Dazai was probably the best person to ask and he'd never do that. Just wanted to leave that night and the monster he was capable of becoming behind. He questioned whether it made him any less human. Scars like these. Though really, everything his body did and went through during the ordeal wasn't human. Except, perhaps, for the scarring. Gods probably didn't scar, right? But he did. Humans did. And he was certainly racking some up over the years. A small grey mark on his wrist, hopefully the result of an experience he couldn't remember. An ellipse of ruined skin right next to his spine from being stabbed in the back. One he tried not to think of. 2 marks on his chest from bullet wounds that were then stabbed and singed. And 2 curves of shiny black flame-brushed skin around his shoulder blades. He had supposed he'd never really know why his body has responded this specific way to his first elected use of corruption, but it had, and so he still wondered. Until tonight. Now Dazai was willingly offering up the information, even if his tone was weird. Airy, yet serious. Chuuya couldn't help but think that at least something of value had come out of this shitty night. The only warning Chuuya had before Dazai started sewing his skin closed was a flat hand on his back, to guide the wound better into the light. Black flame wings, huh? The pain made it come out rougher than Chuuya had meant it. Really, a part of him was mystified. It's not like he'd really been able to see them that night, and even if he had, he'd had much bigger things to focus on. He thought of those couple of times when he was younger, that he'd use his ability to float and pretended he was flying, as if he had wings instead of simply being suspended in space. But he'd been burned by life and he'd fallen. Since then, he'd learned that to really get anywhere, you had to climb, not fly. So learning of his wings at this stage was a strange thing. Dazai hummed in confirmation, too focused on what he was doing. Did they at least look cool? Dazai just sighed as he snipped the thread. Turn around. Chuuya rolled his eyes for probably the 50th time. It was one of those nights. But he wanted to get this over with, so he did as told, standing up so that he could swing his leg back from over the chair and slouch onto it normally. Now that they were face to face, it was obvious not just focus that had Dazai tense. While the topic of Chuuya's wing scars had distracted him plenty from the night's events, Dazai still seemed quite aggravated by it all. And since Dazai seemed to be avoiding his question, which was fine, that wasn't one he really needed answered. He asked another as the disinfectant sunk into the bullet wound on the front of his shoulder. Why do you think the black flames only burned me there? He knew Dazai wouldn't know the answer any better than he did, knew that it was bordering on vulnerability to ask such a thing, but the curiosity he had about those parts of himself he could never know overtook it all. Now that the information Dazai had just told him sunk in more, he found himself just as frustrated with the scars as ever. Once again, someone else had to tell him about his own life, his experiences, had to trust someone else to recount them instead of just remembering on his own. I don't know, Chuuya. A more genuine answer than one could usually expect from Dazai. Not a dismissal, just softly frustrated. Chuuya took one more deep breath and sighed it out before Dazai began the stitches again. As he suspected, Dazai was angrier at himself than at Chuuya for what had happened during the mission. Or maybe he was just angry in general, and to be honest, Chuuya was pretty damn angry himself. He didn't know at what or who, but it suddenly became far easier to focus on tonight's mistake rather than yet another mystery about himself. They could have blamed each other for what happened, but the truth was both of them were too busy blaming themselves more. Still, Chuuya tried to logically justify his actions. You know the bullet was headed straight for your heart, right? Yes, I'm aware. So apparently, those couple sentences Dazai gave about the black flame wings was the most emotion he was going to show tonight, because now everything was coming out cold and clipped, a thin layer of frost over broiling thoughts. Then why are you so mad about it? Chuuya was tired of beating around the bush, and no one claimed he wasn't blunt. You know why. We're better than that. Dazai accidentally yanked the thread in Chuuya's shoulder harshly, the unexpected pain bringing out a grunt from Chuuya. Dazai's eyes widened at that, a bolt of something shining through them. Fear. He diligently went back to patching Chuuya up, more carefully this time. Yeah, we are better than that. There was more than a note of bitterness in his voice. But shit happens to everyone. If he could have shrugged, he would have. Dazai shook his head, frustration still radiating from him, as if he could really plan for every little thing. There would always be stray bullets, and Dazai should damn well know that. But Chuuya was done trying to justify it. Just wanted this night to be over. Finally, Dazai grabbed for the bandages, having to get closer to Chuuya to be able to wrap them around his shoulder. Despite all Dazai's experience in applying bandages, his fingers started out near clumsy, awkwardly brushing over Chuuya's skin as he reached around his shoulder. If Chuuya hadn't been pointedly looking away, he would have also been able to acknowledge how close they were, Dazai's breath puffing over Chuuya's neck as the other boy bent over to see the wound on his back to make sure it was covered. Dazai's fingers steadied as time went on, the end result being bandages that restricted movements more than Chuuya would have liked, but knew would result in better healing. With Dazai drawing back, Chuuya let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. As Chuuya tested the pain in his shoulder, he nodded in thanks, the most thanks he would give and thought was deserved considering everything. Dazai waved him off, arranging things back in the first aid kit. "You get the bed tonight," Dazai said, and that was his own sort of apology. "If you say so." If I sound tired during this, that's because I am. College has been stressing me out so badly these past weeks, but thankfully I enjoy my major enough to not hate it. There are so many things I adore about this fic, but what I like most is how these two interact. Everything teeters between anger and care, Dazai being cryptic after showing an ounce of vulnerability, Chuuya doubting his humanity, the two of them blaming themselves instead of one another. It's all so authentically SKK. Thank you so much for letting me podfic this, Kodos and smiles. I've received a ton of requests as of late, on Spotify specifically, and I will try my best to find the time to read, record, and edit within this week. Wish me luck. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Till next time.